I gained like 9 pounds of clappable material. So later on, there's more meat for Ilya to rock, and he does. And I'm proud to be double cheeked up on.
You won't believe the insane rules Connor Story and Hudson Williams had to follow while filming Heated Rivalry, and the most shocking one was about what they had to wear during those steamy scenes that broke the internet. And in this video, we will reveal something that's going to change how you watch every intimate moment between Shane and Ilya, and it all comes down to a tiny piece of fabric and what naturally happens when two attractive actors get extremely close on camera. But before we get to that jaw-dropping detail, let's talk about how this whole thing started, because turning two actors who could barely skate into believable superstars while making them fall in love on screen required some absolutely wild preparation that went way beyond what anyone expected. The first non-negotiable rule the production laid down was actually kind of beautiful. Connor and Hudson had to become best friends, not just colleagues who could tolerate each other, not just co-stars who could fake chemistry for the camera, but actual best friends who went extra steps to get a matching tattoo, which Hudson describes as the cherry on top of their friendship. The producers understood that the only way Shane and Ilya's relationship would feel authentic was if the actors playing them genuinely supported and trusted each other. And this wasn't just a suggestion, it was a requirement, because what was coming next would test that friendship in ways neither of them could have imagined when they first auditioned. For Connor Story, who plays the Russian NHL player Ilya Rozanov, the preparation started the second he got the role. And when we say started, we mean immediately. Connor had Russian lessons every single day for a month and a half, not once or twice a week like you'd expect for a typical acting gig. He had to study really hard every single day because his character, Ilya, needed a specific bad boy persona with a thick, fake Russian accent that had to sound authentic enough to convince hockey fans who actually know the sport. However, the Russian accent was just the beginning of Connor's transformation. He had to adopt an entirely different personality, slipping into a bad boy character that was nothing like himself. The accent wasn't just about pronunciation, it was about embodying a whole other person with a different energy, different mannerisms, different everything, and he had about 6 weeks to pull it off before cameras started rolling. But it gets super interesting because Connor wasn't going through this preparation alone. Before Hudson Williams was officially cast as Shane Hollander, Connor had to do chemistry readings 2 to 3 times with other actors who were auditioning to play Shane. The production needed to find someone who could match Connor's energy, someone who could create that undeniable spark that makes Heated Rivalry so addictive to watch. Connor had to pick his favorite amongst the actors reading for Shane, and he ended up liking Hudson the most. That chemistry you see on screen actually started in those audition rooms, where they discovered something magical happened when these two performed together. And here's where things get wild with the physical preparation. Both Connor and Hudson had to learn to play hockey and ice skate specifically for their roles. Now, you'd think they'd get months of training to become believable professional athletes, but that wasn't the case. Connor admitted they only had about 2 weeks of skating training before filming started, 2 weeks to go from barely being able to stand on ice to looking like NHL superstars. Connor joked that before the training, he could only waddle on ice. The production described their preparation as an intense crash course, 2 weeks of skating training to become, or at least look like, professional NHL players. Interestingly enough, the production knew 2 weeks wasn't actually enough time to make them look completely authentic in complex hockey scenes, so they used actual hockey player doubles for the intense on-ice action sequences. But Connor and Hudson still had to be good enough to pull off the simpler skating scenes themselves, which meant those 2 weeks were absolutely brutal, with hours on the ice every single day trying to make their movements look natural. However, the physical preparation didn't stop at hockey. Hudson had to learn something even more specific for his role as Shane. He had to learn to stretch his hips and pose for their intimacy scenes. And this is where we start getting into the really fascinating rules that governed how those steamy moments were actually filmed. Hudson was actually so happy with this rule that he even liked the fact that he gained a few pounds to get what he jokingly jokingly called clappable cheeks for Ilya to rock in the show. The dedication to authenticity went beyond just acting. It was about physical transformation too. The production brought in an intimacy coordinator, Chala Hunter, to make sure everything was handled professionally and safely. But what's absolutely wild is what that actually meant in practice. The actors used a natural, consensual touch barrier in their performances to convey the character's need for physical closeness, even in scenes that weren't explicitly intimate. This wasn't just for the bed scenes, it was a technique they used throughout filming to build the constant physical tension between Shane and Ilya, making every moment between them feel charged. And now we're getting to the part that's going to blow your mind. During those intimate scenes that had everyone talking, Connor and Hudson had to use intimacy garments. These garments looked like socks and were explicitly designed to cover their privates while filming. Just a tiny piece of fabric between them and complete exposure while they're performing some of the most intimate scenes you'll see on television. But here's what makes this even crazier. During an interview, Chala, the intimacy coordinator, said something that reveals exactly why these protocols exist. She explained that it's pretty normal for actors to get aroused when making love on screen, and to make it a seamless experience, she makes it part of her introductory conversations with actors, telling them up front, "It's important to say that the body sometimes doesn't know the difference. We're also just human beings who are made up of muscle tissue and nerve endings." This is the reality of filming intimate scenes that nobody publicly talks about, but Chala wanted to normalize it because actors are so afraid of doing the wrong thing, hurting their fellow actor, or crossing a boundary. The fear of having a natural physical response during these scenes creates so much anxiety that it can actually make the filming process worse. So she addresses it head on, making it clear that if something happens, it's not anyone's fault. It's just the body doing its thing. The intimacy garments became essential not just for modesty, but for creating a professional boundary that allowed Connor and Hudson to fully commit to these scenes without the constant worry about crossing lines or making each other uncomfortable. With that sock-like barrier in place and the understanding that their bodies might respond naturally despite their best efforts to remain professional, they could actually focus on the acting and the emotional truth of the scenes. And this brings us back to why that first rule, the requirement that they become genuine best friends, was so crucial. Because performing these intimate moments while wearing nothing but a sock essentially requires a level of trust that you can't fake. Connor and Hudson had to be so comfortable with each other that they could laugh off awkward moments, check in constantly, and support each other through scenes that would make most people want to run off set. Chala worked closely with them throughout filming, choreographing every touch, every movement, and every heated breath. Also, the hip stretches Hudson had to learn were part of making sure his body could hold certain positions comfortably and safely during filming. Nothing was left to chance. Every angle, every moment of contact was discussed, agreed upon, and rehearsed before the cameras started rolling. The actors had complete control over what they were comfortable with, and Chala made sure both of them felt empowered to speak up if anything felt wrong. Interestingly, this level of careful coordination is what allowed the intimate scenes in Heated Rivalry to feel so authentic and passionate. Because Connor and Hudson weren't worried about accidentally crossing boundaries or dealing with uncomfortable situations, all of that had been planned out in advance. They could actually be present in the moment and bring real emotion to these scenes instead of being in their heads about the mechanics. The tactile acting extended beyond just the obviously intimate moments too. Connor and Hudson were encouraged to maintain physical closeness, even in regular scenes like a hand on the shoulder here, and to stand close enough to feel each other's body heat, all carefully choreographed to build that constant simmering tension between Shane and Ilya. Every touch had intention. Every moment of physical proximity was designed to make viewers feel the magnetic pull between these characters. However, while the production was incredibly strict about the intimacy protocols and the physical preparation, there was one thing they surprisingly didn't require. Despite being an adaptation of a beloved book series, Connor and Hudson were not given the strict rule to read the novels before or after auditioning. This might seem shocking considering how passionate the book's fan base is and how important it was to get the characters right, but the production wanted the actors to bring their own interpretations of Shane and Ilya without being completely bound by every detail on the page. This more relaxed approach to the source material gave Connor and Hudson the freedom to discover their characters through through the script and through their work with the director, rather than trying to recreate exactly what readers had imagined perfectly. It allowed them to make Shane and Ilya their own, while still honoring the emotional core of the story that made the book so successful in the first place. So, while they had to follow insane protocols about intimacy garments, learn Russian in 6 weeks, master ice skating in 2 weeks, and essentially live in each other's pockets to build that best friend foundation, they weren't required to do homework on the novels. The production trusted that if they got the chemistry right, built genuine friendship and trust, and committed fully to the intimate moments with all the proper safeguards in place, the characters would come to life authentically. And watching Shane and Ilya's relationship unfold on screen, it's clear that the approach worked. Every rule given on set down to the serious conversation about sock-like intimacy garments and natural body responses all serve to create something that feels real, raw, and absolutely heated.